Just by way of introduction, you're no doubt familiar with the Reinvent series that the paper's been working on all year. And some of the themes that have emerged from that work are, and that we've tried to express through our reporting, is that to improve Rhode Island's economy is really going to take all of us. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, key ingredients for economic recovery lie in leadership, vision, and action. And so for the end of the year project, to kind of tie up the whole endeavor, we are reaching out to the key decision makers in the state, in politics, education, civic life, philanthropy, and business, asking them their thoughts about the Rhode Island economy and also concrete ways they believe they can contribute to make things better. So I've invited you here, obviously, as president of Brown. And I just wanted to start the conversation with a little bit more of a general question. You are an economist.
Yes.
And you also are a relative newcomer to Rhode Island, which means you're looking at the state with fresh eyes and with experience from having lived in other places. I was wondering if you could just share with us a little bit, and I met you for the first time, I think, at the Make It Happen event.
That's right.
Where you said in one of the sessions, wow, you can't job skill train yourself out of 11% unemployment. There's
That's right.
other things that have to go on. And I was just wondering if you could just share with Paul and with me what some of your thoughts are about the current Rhode Island economy and what you perceive as challenges that really have to be overcome and dealt with by everyone in the state in order to get on a better road.
Right. So, that's a really good and very big question. And if I had all the answers, Rhode Island would be thriving right now. So I can't do that for you, unfortunately. I think it's very important to distinguish, and this is part of what I was getting at in the Make It Happen. I think it's important to distinguish between the things that are going to result in the long-run growth of the state versus the specific problems that we're facing because of the slow recovery from a very, very severe recession. So, some of what's hitting Rhode Island right now is completely beyond Rhode Island's control. It's not, all the leadership in the world is not going to get out of the fact that, we had a severe banking crisis. And we're also have been big problems in Europe that are undermining the success of the economy, not just in this state, but all over the whole country. So, part of me coming in as an outsider is saying, give yourselves a break. It's not like all of this is due to some sort of failure of leadership in the state of Rhode Island. People have been suffering all over the country. So I think it's important just to put that into context. I've spent a lot of time studying economic development, and mainly in the context of developing countries, so not in the context of the U.S. economy. But for long-run growth, what are the most important factors? I mean, one is Rhode Island is a small state surrounded by a lot of other states. So in some ways, the analogy is a small country surrounded by lots of other countries. It doesn't really have much market power because of its size. And so it's really important to be very careful at taking into account how its policies affect its competitiveness vis-a-vis the neighboring states.
Yep.
And that's just got to be critical because we're so small. A business can move from Rhode Island to Connecticut or from Connecticut to Rhode Island if we have the right incentives in place. I'm not an expert in the tax structure of Rhode Island. I'd love to learn more about it. But the first thing, if somebody were to give me the assignment of trying to figure out how to make the state as a whole more competitive, I would really sit down and take a really careful look at the tax structure. Given the constraints that are on the state because of past decisions about spending, and we're locked into certain things. But that seems like it's really important. The other thing, and this comes back to the Make It Happen, is I do think that human capital is incredibly important. You may not be able to train your way out of a severe recession, but you can improve the business climate by fostering a more highly skilled workforce that is going to complement the money and that will come to the state and stay in the state if we have the right business climate. So I think of it as sort of business climate on one hand, and then skill and talent on the other hand, that come to bear on making the state better.
Yes. Thank you for those thoughts. Regarding the leadership, I think some Rhode Islanders would agree with your assessment that the recession was devastating nationally, and many of the factors were beyond stakeholders' control here in the state. I think part of the frustration comes from the fact that some of our neighboring states, which are, as you noted, larger, but Massachusetts in particular, have been able to come out of the recession in far better shape than us, and we entered it sooner because of inherent weaknesses within various aspects. And so
that's right.
The thought
Yes.
that some of the decisions we made further exacerbated the severity of the recession and the slowness of our ability to pull out of it, and this growing awareness, as you just said, that as a small state, we have to do certain things to differentiate and position ourselves because of that, I think is really growing in people. So I think you've probably been exposed to some of that disappointment when you said, give yourselves a break.
Yeah.
Because it's a mix.
It is a mix, but I think it's important not to swing all in one direction or all in the other.
Yes.
To say it's not our fault at all, or to say it's completely due to the actions of the leaders in this state. It's a combination.
Absolutely.
And like you said, unemployment went up faster, stayed up longer in Rhode Island than it did in surrounding states. Probably more due to the structure, kind of the business mix that exists within the state. And so, thinking about how to diversify to make the state more robust, it seems like an important thing to do.
Good. And later, I want to return to the question of human capital that you mentioned. But before we go there, I just also wanted to touch on Brown University's current and potential role in strengthening the Rhode Island economy. I know in a September interview that you had with Rich Sallet, you indicated you'd like to see Brown become even more active in the jewelry district than it already is. And you did talk about now's the time for Brown to make critical decisions about how and where it's going to expand. It's at a critical moment for that.
Right.
Given Brown's prominence and the impact it already does have on the local economy, what do you anticipate? How do you anticipate the university becoming even more involved in the civic and economic life of the state? And where would you like to see Brown's involvement expand and why? And also, what are the limits of a private research institution? Are there any? Or should Brown be taking more of a leadership role than it even already is?
I think you just asked me 10 questions. So where can I start? Let me start with the last question, because I actually think that's important. We're a private, not-for-profit institution. We have a very clearly defined mission, and the mission is to serve the community, the nation, and the world through the promotion of research and education. So, I think it's important for people to understand what Brown can do and what Brown can't do. So my view is there are many things we can do that are consistent with our mission that are going to be really good for the city and the state. But there are also many things that aren't appropriate for us to do, and we shouldn't be asked to do them. The mission of research and education, that's a big territory. So there are lots of areas where we can really be key. The other thing I would say is the impact that we have on the city and the state in terms of creating demand for local goods and services, and bringing ideas and talent into the state. To some extent, that's a little bit independent of where we develop. To some extent. So, if we were to really increase our School of Engineering, it's going to have an impact on the state regardless of where it's sited. Now, clearly there are big gains to develop the downtown of Providence. And so I think a lot of people are looking to us to help develop the jewelry district. And, we have 1,000 people down there now, and we have done a lot of development. So, and, when I look at kind of where there's open space and where there's opportunity, there's a lot of opportunity there. So I'm excited about that as a possibility for more building and more development in ways that would, in some ways help the city more than developing in other areas. I hope I'm not being too oblique.
No.
We are in the middle of strategic planning. We kicked this off in September, and the strategic planning has a number of goals. We're looking at lots of things like financial aid and graduate education and undergraduate education. But one of the biggest components of this is reimagining the campus and thinking much more broadly about the physical layout of Brown and where we should be. We have hired 2 planning firms, one that's working with us on kind of larger campus planning issues, not really architectural, but more what do we need and where does it make sense to have it.
Who are you?
Is that public, Marissa?
Yeah.
Okay. Sasaki? I just wanted to make sure that the committee wasn't keeping it private, is the main firm. And then we've also hired a firm called Payette, which is doing a very detailed needs assessment for the School of Engineering. They'll do a little bit of work on brain science, too. And so what we're hoping is this process will, February, March, April, sometime in this spring, we'll really be able to make some decisions about what goes where. And I'm excited about it. There are many different opportunities and possibilities. But, we have the support of the Brown Corporation to really expand in engineering. Brain sciences is one of our big priorities. School of Public Health is about to be announced. So, we do know that we're going to need to expand. Another interesting aspect, though, of the campus planning, and I will say this, is we're also thinking a lot about sustainability. And Providence has so many beautiful buildings that the solution to development isn't always building new things. Sometimes it's redeveloping old things. And we're thinking a lot about that, especially up on College Hill, where things are pretty tight and the campus is so distinctive and so beautiful. So that factors into the decision making too. I wish I could give you specific answers, but we don't have them yet, but we will soon.
I realized kind of the error of my question. I was bundling almost 2 forms of involvement in one. One is obviously the critical question of infrastructure, buildings, expansion of the physical plant. Absolutely.
Right.
I guess what I meant was I was kind of impressed when I went online and refreshed my memory about not only the payments in lieu of taxes and the support for law enforcement and the kids who do community service in Providence Public Schools and so on.
Right.
But, the jobs that you do generate and the research dollars that are brought in. So.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah,
my question, I didn't mean to imply that Brown isn't already doing a lot to help the local economy. In fact, when I get emails from some folks at Brown, I get a reminder because after their email there's a tagline that says, look at all the ways we contribute to the local economy. So I get a reminder. But having said that, I guess what I'm wondering is, given your statements to Rich and the fact that you are going to be expanding literally, physically in the city, I just didn't know, as the new president, if you also feel passionately about Brown taking even more of a leadership or visible role within its mission, as you rightly noted. Some of us might want you to take over the General Assembly, and clearly you can't do that.
No, we can't do that.
But within the broad mission of research and education, and its inevitable and in the positive way, its connection with the local economy, are there any areas that you want to see Brown be a more visible player, whether that means partnering more robustly, for example, with the Rhode Island Foundation, or a cause that may be close to your heart, something like Rhode Island Kids Count, which focuses on child well-being, etc., that kind of thing? What vision do you have for Brown?
So a couple points there that I think are really important. One is a lot of what we're going to be doing we have to do through collaborations. And I've spent a lot of time in the last 5 months, getting to know university presidents in the area, people at Lifespan, people at Care New England, people at the Rhode Island Foundation, people at the Chamber. And I think I've really become persuaded that to really leverage what we do in ways that help the city and the state will require Brown working with other institutions, both public as well as private institutions, both educational and medical institutions and others, private developers even. So that doesn't say the content of where we're going, but I think I'm excited about the collaboration and the partnerships. I think that'll be very valuable and something that's good to do. In terms of what I'm really passionately interested in personally, before I came to Brown, I did a lot of work on health and children's health and health care. And it's something I just think is tremendously important. And I came from a university that didn't have a medical school. And here I am at a university with a medical school and a soon-to-be, knock on wood, School of Public Health. I'm sure that will work, but it's not quite official yet. And, Rhode Island's a really interesting state because it is small. And so there's the possibility for doing really interesting things to think about how to improve the quality of health and health care of a very self-contained population. And, that fits with our mission because it has everything to do with the education of medical professionals and public health professionals, and maybe in collaboration with other institutions with the education of nurses and physicians' assistants and any number of people who work in the area. And it also really has to do with research, because if we want to think about how to improve the quality of healthcare, it means designing programs and then evaluating them and saying, do they work? And that's a research question. So, I know that people in the School of Public Health are really, they're already very involved in the state, and that's going to continue and grow, especially as the cost pressures on healthcare get even more intense.
Your own research has looked at the connection between childhood health and economic
outcomes. Well-being, and health over the life course.
So do you have specific programs in mind to help the low-income children in Providence or the state? Do you already have something in mind that you want to implement here?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that my role as president is to support the research of my faculty. I'm not driving research projects. I'm supporting a wide array of things. I love the fact that we do have many people who are working on children's health issues. I gave a lecture about my own research a couple weeks ago, and a large number of people came, a lot of our clinical faculty and people in the social sciences and people in the humanities. And the discussions afterwards on some of the things that people are doing on prevention of childhood diabetes and obesity, these are the kinds of things that I would love to do myself if I had time. But there's a lot of work going on here that's very important.
You are from the Pittsburgh area.
Yes, I am.
And you even mentioned it at the dinner recently that the Chamber had, where you talked about collaborating more with the hospitals. Obviously, your home city has really gone through a revitalization,
right?
Due in large part because of more productive collaborations with higher ed and the hospitals. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the vision you have for Brown, again, already working with Care New England and Lifespan, but even more so in how that might be able to translate, especially if you do work, for example, maybe with URI and other folks in healthcare, to bring a little of that magic Rhode Island style here.
Right. Well, so the Pittsburgh example is really interesting. I lived there, I mean, I grew up there in the 60s and the 70s. And so I pretty much saw it on its downward slide. You know, I saw the steel mills closing one after another. And it wasn't until after I'd left that the rebirth really happened. But a lot of that was around, the thing that I think is very interesting about Pittsburgh, and that it might apply to Providence and Rhode Island, is it was about collaboration. It was the Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh working with the medical centers, working with the city, to re-energize and revitalize that city. And it wasn't all meds and eds, you know? I mean, it was also attracting a really robust service economy and financial sector back into a city that had been solely dependent on steel, much in the same way that, you know, Providence was dependent on a very narrow slice of manufacturing that's disappeared. So the parallels are quite similar. Again, I think there are two areas where we can really make an impact, both in partnership with other people. One is in medical education, broadly defined, and you know, we're starting this new primary care track. It's in planning right now. You've probably heard of it, haven't you?
I think Felice Fryer's more familiar with it, but I am interested
Yeah.
because I know more doctors are specializing,
Yep.
and there's a need for more
primary
generalists and
care.
primary
Yeah.
care and family doctors.
So I think what people know now, if you look at what's happening to changes in the structure of medical care and also the just cost pressures in medicine, as well as a lot of evidence about what constitutes good care, the models that we're going to see in the future are models where family doctors are going to be working in teams with a range of healthcare professionals, nurses, social workers, physician's assistants, to provide good care for groups of people. And also kind of through a more population health model where a lot of the emphasis is on prevention than on treatment of diseases after they emerge. So Brown is in the planning stages for a new primary care track. It would bring in initially 24 students a year, which is, you know, a pretty big number for a small school. And it would be a completely different curriculum, a new curriculum, and it would have, again, this public health focus that really tries to train so we're really trying to train these physicians of the future. This is still very much in the planning stages, and I know Ed Wing has recently invited a number of people from around the state to serve on an advisory board who will basically help us develop the best program for Rhode Island. And while we expect this to be a national program, you know, the doctors who come out of it they're going to go all over the place. I think, you know, people do tend to stay where they're trained, especially where they have their residencies. I think about 13% of doctors in the state of Rhode Island were trained at Brown Medical School. And we would like to see some of those students stick here. So getting the input of people from around the state, I think, is really useful. So that's one thing. So that's an area where, you know, in terms of medical education, I think Rhode Island could really be a powerhouse with Brown working in collaboration with other units. The other area, and I think, you know, frankly, it's harder, but we need to work on it, is the idea of establishing much better relationships with companies to help us develop intellectual property into kind of the commercialization of what comes out of research.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you know, is done. Boston's done very well, and Palo Alto has done very well.
Just MIT.
And yeah, exactly. And given, you know, both in engineering as well as in medicine, brain science, which sort of spans medicine and engineering, there is potential to do that. I'm learning more about what that takes. I think it's easier said than done, But it doesn't mean that, again, with careful collaborations within the state, we can't do a much better job than we've been doing.
Sounds like you and Dave Dooley have that in common.
Yes.
You'd also like to improve in that area.
Yes.
I just want to touch on it again briefly. This collaboration with the hospitals, was I correct in understanding that obviously Brown Medical School already has relationships with both hospital chains.
Right.
But the idea here is that Care New England and Lifespan would work more closely together, sharing resources, lab equipment in the hope of drawing even more federal grants to the state. And I just wanted to make sure I understood what Brown's role in all of that might be.
Well, so if you remember at the chamber meeting, it was Tim Babineau announced that Lifespan and Care New England were creating a task force.
Yes.
To talk about ways that their institutions could collaborate more in research. I mean, we're already deeply invested in research with Lifespan doctors and with Care New England doctors. And the fact that now those two are talking and really trying to bring them together is going to be good for this whole triangle. So I see this, in terms of research, it would be in the best interest of all of us and the best interest of the state if we really operate as a single unit.
Yeah.
And I think we're moving in that direction.
Thank you.
So another form of collaboration is connection, and it's the physical connection between the traditional Brown campus and the hospitals and the new Brown campus that's developing in the south end. Perhaps the key to that is the trolley system that's been proposed by the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority. Do you see Brown making a financial contribution or any kind of resource contribution to RIPTA or to the state to actually fund that and get that?
We haven't gotten that far. We have, as part of our planning, we're doing some transportation studies. We know that transportation is key. And we haven't, so that's what you're ahead of us. We're not even there. It'll take a little while to get there.
Do you expect that to be part of the next 5-year institutional master plan?
I have no idea. I mean, I know that as part of our planning, we will have to address transportation. Frankly, I would hope that, given that we're talking about partnerships, that transportation would be something that the city and state could really help us out with, because I think it's something that benefits everybody. But we haven't started those discussions.
I think you've already addressed this, but do you have a specific site for the engineering school?
No.
And I was just, perhaps you know that one of the things we've been focusing on with the Reinvent series is job skills training.
Mm-hmm.
And also this whole recognition nationally that, the economy has changed. What was sufficient 30 years ago in terms of education for many students is no longer sufficient.
Right.
And that some of the growth is going to be in so-called middle skill level jobs, which require some form of post-secondary education.
Mm-hmm.
We'll need a lot of people to still get 4-year degrees, but we're going to need a lot of people to get 2-year degrees and certificates and so on. Everyone's going to need more training,
Mm-hmm.
it's particularly technical training.
Right.
And President Obama has made this a real mantra during his presidency. I was just wondering, but I also noticed at the same time when I took a look at your inauguration remarks, for Brown, you see benefit and value not only in kind of the application, the practical application of education, but also the pursuit of knowledge and research
Mm-hmm.
and following one's passions.
Yeah.
Which I do understand.
Right.
But I wanted you to kind of take off your president of an elite
Yeah.
institution for a moment and speak almost more as an economist,
Yeah.
looking at market needs
Yeah.
and what we as a society have to do to help thousands of people skill up.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know what role, if any, you think Brown, and it can be through Annenberg, it
Mm-hmm.
can be through the tutoring that some Brown students do for community service. What is the appropriate role for Brown to help advance the conversation and actual work as Rhode Island struggles to help many of its lower income and vulnerable kids get higher levels of education and training.
Right.
And it goes right to the heart of your human capital issue about one of the main things we need to do to strengthen our economic well-being as a state.
Right. So these are this is a really good question. I think, one of the points I was trying to make in my inauguration is that people need a base of knowledge that makes them able to continue to learn new things over the course of their lives. And that's what a liberal education really aims to do. Now, how that's exactly done is going to differ. There are many different types of education, and we're not trying to fill the whole market. We are a niche, just like all of our other partners in the city and state fill different niches, and it's kind of nice. We don't really compete that much. One thing that's absolutely essential is that kids, one, finish high school, and two, they finish high school knowing how to read well and write well and speak well. Because if they don't have those really basic core skills, when they're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, they're not going to be able to learn new things. So, one area where we can help, and I think we do this through tutoring and we do this through our students who go into schools and help high school students apply to college. We do this through our Masters in Urban Education, is really try to buffer the quality of the education that kids are getting in the Providence schools.
How focused is that? Is that you're doing that all in one school, all at the middle school level, all at the high school level?
Well, there are many different programs. So one of the programs, and Marissa can give you a report that would give you all the details.
She did, actually. I
Yeah.
apologize I didn't share it with Paul. I
Right.
just got it today.
Right. But I know that there are kids, at least in a number of high schools, that are helping kids prepare for college application and really helping them get through that process. And the Brown students love doing it.
And are those tutors every year sort of brought to the schools with the same sort of skill set about how to help those kids? Or is it an uneven, well, this year I got lucky, I got Marissa, next year my brother might get, Roberto, who's not as interested in helping.
Is there training for
Is there
the Brown
training
kids?
for getting in there and actually accomplishing what they're
I
setting out
think
to
this.
do?
This is all done
Consistent.
under the auspices of the Swearer Center,
Yes.
and they're pretty careful
I know
about what
they're-
they do. Are all the students absolutely as good as each other? No, that would never be the case. But they care a lot about making sure that the students they send out know what they're doing. So that's an important.
And according to the information that Marissa sent me, it's done in collaboration with AmeriCorps.
Okay,
And
so-
they served 5,000 high school students last year, which is a big chunk, and there were 10 undergraduates who worked like 10 hours a week in the schools, meeting with the kids, helping them fill out and do essays and so on. So
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of the extent of it either.
Yeah.
I think what Paul was asking more about is, given the considerable resources of Brown, do you envision an even more high-profile or systemic way that Brown might participate at this particular critical moment in Rhode Island? We have a lot of activity, as you know, going on with K through 12. Under Deborah Gist, Race to the Top, we now have maybe a merger with the Board of Higher Ed. That seems to be daily changing.
Right.
We're having a lot of people look more to CCRI, asking hard questions of it. Is the institution prepared to do this federal mandate of helping more kids get post-secondary? So just picking your brain a little bit. Certainly, Brown's already doing a lot.
We do it through our Department of Education. We do it through the Annenberg Institute for School Reform.
And Swearer.
And through Swearer. Those are our main outlets, because those are the three parts on campus that are really focused on education and also on outreach to the community. I think they do a terrific job. I know that the chair of Education Studies was asked by the mayor to be on a task force, and they're doing work with the state, the Annenberg Institute for
And
School
I believe you've
Reform.
already met with Szydlowski?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, she's terrific.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And have you had-
she's coming back and talking to Roger Nozaki and others about starting a summer program. I don't know where that's going, but there's just a lot of
You're talking
conversation
about-
going on.
And you mentioned you have visited already Rhode Island Foundation, you mentioned
Yeah.
that. And you've met,
Yeah.
I assume Deborah Gist and maybe Ray DePasquale. Have you met the kids?
You know,
Well, she was
I have
out,
not.
actually.
I
She
have
was
not,
out.
and I met Ray DePasquale couldn't come to something that I went to that I'd hoped he would attend, and I've been introduced to him, but I haven't had to sit down
And
with
Deborah
him
Gist,
yet.
of course, was out with brain surgery,
Yeah,
but she's
right,
back now, so I anticipate
right.
you'll meet her next year.
Mhm.
Have you had a chance to meet with URI President Dooley?
Of course.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
Okay.
No, I've met. I think Ray is the only one who I really
Okay.
haven't had a one-on-one with. Now, on continuing education, you know, I think we may play some role, but it's going to be a little bit more limited. I mean, Brown is not going to, you know, continuing technical education is not really part of our niche.
Right.
I don't think it makes sense for us.
Yes.
We are experimenting more with online education.
Yes.
We're developing a number of for-credit courses for Brown students. We're developing some Coursera courses.
I'd actually like to do a separate story on that, so I'm
Yeah.
going to reach out to you looking at
Yeah.
online learning. Thank you.
And we're not offering these for credit, the Coursera courses for credit, because we're still in experiment mode. We want to make sure that what we do is good.
Yes.
But could you imagine getting to the point where, you know, high school students who are advanced are taking some of these courses? Absolutely. You know, I think there are many ways that online education can be used for
Yes.
both technical training as well as improving the quality of high school. So to the extent that we're playing in that arena, as are many other universities,
Yeah.
I think we'll have something to contribute there.
Very good.
Yeah. I mean, finally, I would say Brown employees, there are a lot of them in the state. And
You're, I think, the 5th largest employer in the state. Is
yeah,
that right, Marcia?
yeah, and you know, we have good benefits that help support people when they send their kids to college. We think that's important, and that part of our benefit package reflects the value that we place on higher education.
And you, according to the materials, offer $4 million in scholarships to Rhode Island students. I met one of the young men from Central Falls High School who got a scholarship to Brown.
As part of your high school series?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I met some of the kids who've been involved with the music. But I always forget his name. Sebastian
Community
Roof.
music
Community
The community
music
music.
works.
Some of those kids have come into Brown. They're terrific.
I just wanted to ask you one quick question. You met Dave Dooley. What do you see as a possibility for collaboration with URI and engineering programs in particular?
Well, we've actually, Dave and I have talked a little bit more about health than we have about engineering
So
specifically.
public health programs?
Yeah, I mean, we do work with them in nanoscience. So we have a joint nanoscience program, which is quite seems to be thriving. That we just had the 5-year anniversary of the program. I went to the celebration of that, where they had poster sessions all over the place, and that's actually one of the areas where the potential for commercialization is quite high.
And maybe even some of your marine sciences,
Yeah.
oceanography would
Right.
be a natural.
Right.
Yep.
And then I think I might have been asking about engineering because Rhode Island, like many state institutions, has a couple marquee programs. You know, obviously, its School of Oceanography is very respected.
Yeah.
But they have like a very innovative and well-regarded international engineering program where you go for 5 years and become fluent in a foreign language, which I just think is fascinating.
Yeah, I heard about that. It's terrific.
It's really cool.
Right.
And then you go and you work for Siemens in Germany, or you go to Japan, or and it's really quite something.
Yeah.
And so, just given the fact that it could be advantageous on many levels to have greater levels of collaboration, and you are looking to expand in engineering.
Right.
It's
There's
just
potential for that.
intriguing.
And the other thing I have to tell you is, you know, when you talk about collaborations in universities, the best collaborations come up through faculty connections. They come up from the bottom. They don't. It's not Dave Dooley and I sitting down at lunch that's going to make a research collaboration happen.
But the faculty have to feel empowered to do that,
They have
and
to
the
feel-
culture of commercialization has to be there.
That's right. But the reason why I mention that is, you know, I've been discovering every week more things that are happening that, I'm still learning the university, and there's a lot going on.
And some of the nicest people aren't the best at self-promotion.
That's right.
So you might not hear about some of the good things going on. Did you want to ask more?
I mean, the nanoscience I didn't know that much about until I went to this thing.
Just another question about collaboration. Has anyone, in any of your meetings with either other university officials or here in Rhode Island or other state officials, anybody talk to you about the idea of Brown joining in a research collaboration that would help the state gather data, economic data? That's one of the possibilities that came out of the Make It Happen forum that occurred here in Rhode Island. The idea of and it would sort of be a two-way street. Basically, in some respects, it would be a Rhode Island state agency saying we need to look at this piece of economic data and sort of farming that out to someone in the university system.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some talk among the private colleges and universities about how that might work. We're not very far along on that.
Mm-hmm. Did you see any key stumbling blocks there?
Well, I mean, I think coordination's always a little bit difficult. I think the fact that faculty aren't really contract researchers is difficult. So you have to figure that out.
But
you have
grad
to figure
students
out
could be. They would
graduate
love it
students,
for their
postdocs. I mean, so there is a potential for building something that would help kind of provide university expertise to state agencies. A lot of that is going on already, but it's not going on in a very coherent manner, right? So and another model for doing it, and again, I'm just thinking out loud, I'm not talking about anything that's really in the works, would be for different universities to sort of take different areas as their area of expertise. So that, Brown could be the resource on issues related to health and healthcare, and Bryant College may be on business issues, and because we don't have a business school, so there are different strategies, and it's something that we started to talk about at Make It Happen Rhode Island, but it hasn't really developed yet.
But one of the things that universities in general, and Brown in particular, does excel at is this whole idea of human capital and harnessing energy and potential and youth, and I noticed in some of the materials online that you have about the ways that you contribute to the local economy. 25 startups have started, I think, in the past 5 years, and I meet really talented and committed Brown grads all the time in my work.
Yep.
You left off Kath Connolly on the list, founder of Craftland, but Sarah Friedman from the learning community. I mean, there are tons of people. So clearly, some people who come to Brown fall in love with, I would argue, the human scale of Rhode Island, which is something you talked about.
Right.
It's quirky and it's strange, but you feel like you can have an impact and get things done because everybody knows everybody, and that's attractive for some people.
Yeah.
And so, because we know that there are hundreds of Brown grads who are doing community service, we know there are Brown grads growing organic food and starting startup companies and doing all the rest of it. Is there anything Brown, in conjunction with the state, can do to make Rhode Island more attractive to more young people? Some people are never going to want to stay, and they shouldn't. They should go to Tanzania and New York City. But this idea that we're...
I love that contrast. Tanzania and New York City, of course. Right.
People should venture out into the world after they go to college. But Rhode Island should also be doing all it can to try to keep wonderful people, because there are assets here that are not going fully exploited, and it's a great way to differentiate and strengthen our economy. And obviously the state holds part of this responsibility, but is there a way that Brown and the state can work together to just help keep some of this young talent? And if so, what's a great idea? What should smart people be thinking about in 2013?
So a couple things I would say to that. I mean, first, the city's already done a tremendous amount. And I think this is another area where I feel like coming in as an outsider, you want to say to people, look what you have done.
Okay, so what has the city done?
Look what you've done. Look at what this picture city looked like in 1975 or 1980.
It's a little bit nicer now.
It's a little bit nicer. I mean, I think people used to think of, okay, I'll come to Brown and I just don't even want to look across that river at the bottom of the hill, right? And I see students who love this place. They really love it. So I think that reflects the change in the city. One thing I'm going to be focusing on a lot is developing more internship possibilities for students for the summers and during the year. And there's nothing like, I think for students who don't get into the community, the Swearer Center kids are out there. They know it, and they're ones who are very likely to want to stay. It would be nice to have kids doing, summer internships with local businesses where they really start to get connected. They understand what it's like to live here, not as a student, but as an employee, as a professional. And that would be an area where I think we can really collaborate. The other factor, and this isn't just for Brown students, this is for everybody, but it comes right back to where we started, which is improving the quality of the schools. Because I think people do come, this is more to do with Providence than it does with Rhode Island, but I think, people come, they move in, they have kids, and they look for the nearest exit and from the city. And that's an issue. So if it's, creating magnet schools, charter schools, just something to really jumpstart
So
the
maybe
quality.
2013 I will be doing some interviews with you and Szydlowski, maybe?
Okay.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say, a lot of businesses say the reason they don't relocate or open up or expand in Rhode Island is because of the quality of the school system, especially if they can open up 30 miles away in Massachusetts, which has arguably the best public school system in America.
Right.
So, to your point, yes, I think
Yeah.
it's relevant.
And this comes back to where we started the discussion, which is, how do you create a good climate for business? And part of that is, the tax system and the business infrastructure. But the other part of it is focusing on the amenities of, the kind of qualities of life that are going to draw a really good workforce. And education is really important.
John, did you have anything that we didn't touch on, or
Oh, excellent. You
any
did
questions
very,
for
very well.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
We really appreciate you coming to talk to
I'm
us.
glad
And
to
you
be
were
here.
so relaxed and natural, even with that.
I just ignored it. I ignored it. And you have to do another interview with me in May when our strategic planning is farther along.